Zurich has been continuously inhabited since Roman times. The name Zurich is possibly derived from the Celtic Dur. It is first mentioned in 807 under the form Turigus, then in 853 as Turigus. The Latinized form is Turicum, but the false form Tigurum was given currency by Glareanus and held its ground from 1512 to 1748. It is not till the 9th century that we find the beginnings of the Teutonic town of Zurich, which arose from the union of four elements: the royal house and castle on the Lindenhof, with the king's tenants around the Grossmünster, the Fraumünster, the community of free men on the Zurichberg. Similarly, we can distinguish four stages in the constitutional development of the town: the gradual replacing of the power of the abbess by that of the patricians, the admittance of the craft guilds to a share with the patricians in the government of the town, the granting of equal political rights to the country districts ruled as subject lands by the burghers, and the reception as burghers of the numerous immigrants who had settled in the town. Political power lay with the Grossmünster and Fraumünster abbeys during medieval times, until the Guild revolt in the 14th century, which led to the joining of the Swiss Confederacy. Zurich was the focus of the Swiss Reformation led by Huldrych Zwingli, and it came to riches with silk industry in early modern times. Early history. Numerous lakeside settlements from the Neolithic and Bronze Age have been found, such as those in the Zurich Pressehaus and Zurich Mozartstrasse. The settlements were found in the 1800s, submerged in Lake Zurich, located on the then swampland between the limit and Lake Zurich around Sechslautenplatz on small islands and peninsulas in Zurich. Prehistoric pile dwellings around Lake Zurich were set on piles to protect against occasional flooding by the Linth and Jonah. Zurich Enger Alpenquai is located on Lake Zurich lakeshore in Enger, a locality of the municipality of Zurich. It was neighbored by the settlements at Kleiner Hafner and Große Hafner on a then peninsula respectively island in the affluence of the limit, within an area of about 0.2 square kilometers in the city of Zurich, as well as being part of the 56 Swiss sites of the UNESCO World Heritage Site prehistoric pile dwellings around the Alps. The settlement is also listed in the Swiss Inventory of Cultural Property of National and Regional Significance as a class object. In 2004, traces of a previously unknown pre-Roman Celtic settlement were discovered, the center of which lay on the Lindenhof Hill respectively, the area around the Münsterhof Square besides the limit. The Celtic Helvetians had a settlement when they were succeeded by the Romans, who established a customs station here for goods going to and coming from Italy. At the later Vicus Turicum, probably in the 1st century BC or even much earlier, the Celts settled at the Lindenhof Oppidum. In 1890, so-called potten lumps were found, whose largest weights 59.2 kilograms at the prehistoric pile-dwelling settlement Alpenquai. The pieces consist of a large number of fused Celtic coins, which are mixed with charcoal remnants. Some of the 18,000 coins originate from the Eastern Gaul, others are of the Zurich type that were assigned to the local Helvetii, which date to around 100 BC. There's also an island sanctuary of the Helvetii in connection with the settlement at the preceding Oppidu at Liburg on the former Große Hafner Island. At the Sechslautenplatz on the affluence of the limit on Lake Zurich lakeshore, the Roman Vicus Turicum first belonged to the province of Gallia Belgica, and to Germania Superior from AD 90. Following Constantine's reform of the empire in 318, The border between the Praetorian prefectures of Gaul and Italy was just east of Turicum, crossing the Linth between Lake Zurich and Walensee. Roman Turicum was not fortified, but there was a small garrison at the tax-collecting point, set up not exactly on the border, but downstream of Lake Zurich, where the goods entering Gaul were loaded onto larger ships. South of the castle, at the location of the St. Peter Church, there was a temple to Jupiter. The earliest record of the town's name is preserved on a 2nd century tombstone found in the 18th century on Linden Hall, referring to the Roman castle as Turcen. Christianity was introduced early in the 3rd century by Felix and Regula, with whom Exuperantius was afterwards associated. According to legend, Felix and Regula were executed at the location of the Wassakish in 286. The Alemanni settled in the Swiss plateau from the 5th century, but the Roman castle persisted into the 7th century. The earliest manuscript mention of the settlement, as Castellum Turgum, describes the mission of Columban in 610. An 8th century list of toponyms from Ravenna mentions Zurich. There is a legendary account of an Alemannic Duke Wojtyla residing on and giving his name to the Uetliberg, Holy Roman Empire. Zurich was part of Frankish-ruled Alemannia from 746, following the blood court at Cannstatt, lying in the Togo dominated by Constans, a Carolingian castle, built on the site of the now-ruined Roman castle by the grandson of Charlemagne. Louis the German is mentioned in 835. Louis also founded the Frauenmuster Abbey on the 21st of July 853 for his daughter Hildegard. He endowed the Benedictine convent with the lands of Zurich, Uri, and the Albis forest, and granted the convent immunity, placing it under his direct authority. In 1045, King Henry III granted the convent the right to hold markets, collect tolls, and mint coins, and thus effectively made the abbess the ruler of the city. Zurich became Reichsunmittelbar in 1218 with the extinction of the main line of the Zähringer family. A city wall was built during the 1230s, enclosing 38 hectares. The Bahnhofstrasse marks the course of the western moat. The earliest citizen stone houses at the Rennweg date to this period, using the dilapidated Carolingian castle as a quarry. Emperor Frederick II promoted the abbess of the Frauenmuster to the rank of a duchess in 1234. The abbess assigned the mayor, and she frequently delegated the minting of coins to citizens of the city. However, the political power of the convent slowly waned in the 14th century, beginning with the establishment of the Zunftordnung in 1336 by Rudolf Brunn, who also became the first independent mayor, i.e., not assigned by the abbess. For this time, the city increasingly came under the domination of the Zunfter, a process only fully completed in the 16th century with the suspension of the monasteries following the Reformation. Prodigikisch was built in 1231 AD as a Romanesque church of the then Dominican Prodigikloster nearby the Neumarkt and the city's hospital. As the other convents in Zurich, it was abolished after the Reformation in Switzerland. The Codex Manus, a major source of medieval German poetry, was written and illustrated in the early 14th century in Zurich. The Frankish kings had special rights over the tenants, were the protectors of the two churches, and had jurisdiction over the free community. In 870 the sovereign placed his powers over all four in the hands of a single official, and the union was still further strengthened by the wall built round the four settlements in the 10th century as a safeguard against Saracen marauders and feudal barons. The Reichsvote passed to the Counts of Lenzburg, and then to the Dukes of Zähringen. Meanwhile, the abbess of the Benedictine Frau Munster had been acquiring extensive rights and privileges over all the inhabitants. Though she never obtained the criminal jurisdiction, the town flourished greatly in the 12th and 13th centuries, the silk trade being introduced from Italy. In 1218 the Reichsvote passed back into the hands of the king, who appointed one of the burghers as his deputy, the town thus becoming a free imperial city under the nominal rule of a distant sovereign. The abbess in 1234 became a princess of the empire, but power rapidly passed from her to the council, which she had originally named to look after police, but which came to be elected by the burghers. Though the abbess was still the Lady of Zurich, this council was made up of the representatives of certain knightly and rich mercantile families, who excluded the craftsmen from all share in the government, though it was to these last that the town was largely indebted for its rising wealth and importance. Old Swiss Confederacy. In October 1291 the town made an alliance with Uri and Schwyz, and in 1292 failed in a desperate attempt to seize the Habsburg town of Winterthur. After that, Zurich began to display strong Austrian leanings, which characterize much of its later history. In 1315 the men of Zurich fought against the Swiss Confederates at the Battle of Morgarten. The year 1336 marks the admission of the craftsmen to a share in the town government, which was brought about by Rudolf Brunn, a patrician. Under the new constitution the little council was made up of the burgomaster and 13 members from the Constable and the 13 masters of the craft guilds, each of the 26 holding office for 6 months. The Great Council of 200 members consisted of the Little Council, plus 78 representatives each of the Constable and of the guilds, besides 3 members named by the burgomaster. The office of burgomaster was created and given to Brunn for life. Out of this change arose a quarrel with one of the branches of the Habsburg family, in consequence of which Brunn was induced to throw in the lot of Zurich with the Swiss Confederation. The double position of Zurich as a free imperial city and as a member of the Everlasting League was soon found to be embarrassing to both parties. In 1373 and again in 1393 the powers of the Constable were limited and a majority in the executive secured to the craftsmen, who could then aspire to the burgomastership. Meanwhile, the town had been extending its rule far beyond its walls, a process which began in the 14th, and attained its height in the 15th century. Zurich joined the Swiss Confederation as the 5th member in 1351. Zurich was expelled from the Confederation in 1440 due to a war with the other member states over the territory of Toggenburg. Zurich was defeated in 1446, and readmitted to the Confederation in 1450. During the later half of the 15th century, Zurich managed to substantially increase the territory under its control, gaining the Thurgau, Winterthur, Stein am Rhein and Eglisau. Zurich's position in the Confederacy was improved further with its role in the Burgundy Wars under Hans Waldmann. From 1468 to 1519, Zurich was the Vorort of the Federal Diet. This thirst for territorial aggrandizement brought about the First Civil War in the Confederation, in which, at the Battle of St. Jacob and der Sihl, under the walls of Zurich, the men of Zurich were completely beaten and the burgomaster Stissy slain. The purchase of the town of Winterthur from the Habsburgs marks the culmination of the territorial power of the city. It was to the men of Zurich and the leader Hans Waldmann that the victory of Morat was due in the Burgundian War, and Zurich took a leading part in the Italian campaign of 1512 to 15 the burgomaster Schmid naming the new Duke of Milan. No doubt her trade connections with Italy led her to pursue a southern policy, traces of which are seen as early as 1331 in an attack on the Val Leventina, and in 1478, when Zurich men were in the van at the fight of Jornico, won by a handful of Confederates over 12,000 Milanese troops. In 1400 the town obtained from the King Wenceslaus the Reichsvotek, which carried with it complete immunity from the empire and the right of criminal jurisdiction. As early as 1393 the chief power had practically fallen into the hands of the Great Council, and in 1498 this change was formally recognized. This transfer of all power to the guilds had been one of the aims of the burgomaster Hans Waldmann, who wished to make Zurich a great commercial center. He also introduced many financial and moral reforms, and subordinated the interests of the country districts to those of the town. He practically ruled the Swiss Confederation, and under him Zurich became the real capital of the League. But such great changes excited opposition, and he was overthrown and executed. His main ideas were embodied, however, in the Constitution of 1498, by which the patricians became the first of the guilds, and which remained in force till 1798. Some special rights were also given to the subjects in country districts. It was the prominent part taken by Zurich in adopting and propagating the principles of the Reformation which finally secured for it the lead in the Confederation. The Augustiner and Prodigia monasteries and Etenbach nunnery and Ruti Abbey nearby Rapperswil were also disestablished in 1524. The aftermath of the Reformation in Zurich resulted also in the abolishment of the Zurich convent. The worship in the churches were discontinued, and the buildings and income of the monasteries were assigned to an according AMT, a bailiwick of administratively function of the city's government. Reformation. Zwingli started the Swiss Reformation at the time when he was the main preacher in Zurich at the Grossmünster. He started his preaching by preaching systematically through Matthew, which was a huge difference from almost every other priest that preached through the liturgical cycle of readings issued by the Church. He lived and preached in Zurich from 1484 until his death in 1531 at the defeat of Zurich in the Second War of Kappel. Zwingli's Zurich Bible first appeared in 1531 and continued to be revised until the present day. Katharina von Zimmern, the last abbess of the Fraumünster Abbey, supported the peaceful introduction of the Reformation in Zurich. Early modern history. An important source for Zurich under Heinrich Bullinger is the Wikipedia, a collection of curious documents from 1560 to 1587. During the 16th and 17th centuries, the Patrician Council of Zurich adopted an increasingly aristocratic and isolationist attitude. A sign of this was the second ring of impressive city ramparts was built in 1642 under the impression of the 30 Years' War. The funds required for this ambitious project were imposed on the subject territories without consultation, resulting in revolts that were crushed by force. From 1648, the city changed its official status from Reichsstaat to Republic, thus likening itself to city republics like Venice and Geneva. In the 17th and 18th centuries, a distinct tendency becomes observable in the town government to limit power to the actual holders. Thus the country districts were consulted for the last time in 1620 and 1640, and a similar breach of the charters of 1489 and 1531 occasioned disturbances in 1777. The Council of 200 came to be largely chosen by a small committee of the members of the guilds actually sitting in the council. By the Constitution of 1713 it consisted of 50 members of the Little Council, 18 members named by the Constable, and 100 144 selected by the 12 guilds, these 162 being co-opted for life by those members of the two councils who belonged to the guild to which the deceased member himself had belonged. Early in the 18th century, a determined effort was made to crush by means of heavy duties the flourishing rival silk trade in Winterthur. It was reckoned that about 1650 the number of privileged burghers was 9,000, while the rule extended over 170,000 persons. The first symptoms of active discontent appeared later among the dwellers by the lake, who founded in 1794 a club at Stafford and claimed the restoration of the liberties of 1489 and 1531, a movement which was put down by force of arms in 1795. The old system of government perished in Zurich as elsewhere in Switzerland. With the French invasion in the spring of 1798, and under the Helvetic Constitution the country districts obtained political liberty. Napoleonic Era. Zurich lost much of its power in the Helvetic Republic, with territory lost to the Aargau, the Thurgau and the canton of Linz. In 1799, the city became even a battlefield of the French Revolutionary Wars of the Second Coalition. At the First Battle of Zurich in June and the Second Battle of Zurich in September, Gottfried Keller became an intellectual influence on the radical, free-thinking side in the formation of Switzerland as a federal state. The environs of Zurich are famous in military history on account of the two battles of 1799. In the first battle, the French under General André Massena on the defensive were attacked by the Austrians under the Archduke Charles, Massena retiring behind the limit before the engagement had reached a decisive stage. The second and far more important battle took place on the 25th and the 26th of September. Massena, having forced the passage of the limit, attacked and totally defeated the Russians and their Austrian allies under Korsakov's command. Modern history. In 1839, the city had to yield to the demands of its rural subjects, following the Jura Putsch of 6 September. Most of the ramparts built in the 17th centuries were torn down, without ever having been sieged, to allay rural concerns over the city's hegemony. The limit choir was built in several stages between 1823 and 1859 along the right side of the limit. From 1847, the Spanish Brotley-Bahn, the first railway on Swiss territory, connected Zurich with Baden, putting the Zurich Hauptbahnhof at the origin of the Swiss rail network. The present building of the Hauptbahnhof dates to 1871. The emergence of the Sechslauten as the city's most prominent traditional holiday dates to this period. The Ottenbach Monastery, founded 1285, fell victim to the increasingly grand city planning in 1902. With the entire Lindenhof it was built on remove to make way for the new Urania-Strasse and administration buildings. It had been serving as a prison, and the inmates were moved to the newly completed cantonal prison in Regensdorf. But under the cantonal constitution of 1814 matters were worse still, for the town had 130 representatives in the Great Council, while the country districts had only 82. A great meeting at Uster on the 22nd of November 1830 demanded that two-thirds of the members in the Great Council should be chosen by the country districts. In 1831 a new constitution was drawn up on these lines, the town getting 71 representatives as against 141 allotted to the country districts, though it was not till 1837–38 that the town finally lost the last relics of the privileges which it had so long enjoyed as compared with the country districts. From 1803 to 1814, Zurich was one of the 6 directorial cantons, its chief magistrate becoming for a year the chief magistrate of the Confederation, while in 1815 it was one of the 3 cantons, the government of which acted for 2 years as the federal government when the Diet was not sitting. In 1833, Zurich tried hard to secure a revision of the federal constitution and a strong central government. The town was the federal capital for 1839 to 40, and consequently the victory of the Conservative Party there in 1839 caused a great stir throughout Switzerland. But when in 1845 the Radicals regained power at Zurich, which was again the federal capital for 1845 to 46, the town took the lead in opposing the Sonderbund cantons. It of course voted in favor of the federal constitutions of 1848 and of 1874, while the cantonal constitution of 1869 was remarkably advanced for the time. The enormous immigration from the country districts into the town from the 30s onwards created an industrial class which, though settled in the town, did not possess the privileges of burghership and consequently had no share in the municipal government. First of all, in 1860 the town schools, open to settlers only on paying high fees, were made accessible to all. Next, in 1875, 10 years residence ipso facto conferred the right of burghership. The Quayenlagen and Quaybrucke are important milestones in the development of the modern city of Zurich, as by the construction of the new lakefront, Zurich was transformed from the medieval small town on the limit and Sihl to an attractive modern city on the Lake Zurich lake shore. Under the guidance of the city engineer Arnold Berkeley, the town and canton continued to be on the liberal, or radical, or even socialistic side, while from 1848 to 1907 they claimed 7 of the 37 members of the federal executive or Bundesrat, these 7 having filled the presidential chair of the Confederation in 12 years, no canton surpassing this record. From 1833 onwards the walls and fortifications of Zurich were little by little pulled down, thus affording scope for the extension and beautification of the town. In 1915 the tenant organization Mietverband was founded in Zurich. Zurich was accidentally bombed during World War II. An economic boom set in after World War II, lasting into the 1960s. The further, for the time extremely high subventions, but lacking of alternative governmental cultural programs for the youth in Zurich, occurred in 1980 to the so-called Open House Grewal youth protests, Zürich Brand, meaning Zurich is burning, documented in the Swiss documentary film Zürich Brand. The most prominent politician involved was Emily Lieberher, then member of the city's executive authorities. In 1982, communal elections resulted in the first conservative majority in 53 years, but in the early 1980s, Emily Lieberher and Ursula Koch were the first female politicians in Zurich's executive authority Stadtrat, both representing the Social Democratic SP political party. From 1990, there has again been a leftist majority. The introduction of liberal laws favored the development of Zurich's role as regional center of nightlife. Also during the 1990s, a liberalization of zoning laws led to a renewal of construction activity. Growing suburbanization since the 1960s had resulted in congestions due to commuting, partly eased with the Zurich S-Bahn, introduced 1990. Population declined during the 1980s to 1990s but began to increase again in the 2000s, paired with significant gentrification of central areas. Demographic history. Zurich during its period of territorial expansion and prosperity during the late 14th to early 15th century increased in population to an estimated 7,000 inhabitants. This figure decreased rapidly as a result of the Old Zurich War to some 5,000, comparable to the population of Bern, Schaffhausen or Lucerne. Population grew slowly but steadily during the 16th to 18th centuries, reaching 10,000 by 1800. Population then increased rapidly during the 19th century due to industrialization and the increased availability of building space after the destruction of the city walls in the 1830s, reaching 28,000 by 1888. Counting the population within the modern city borders, the figures are 17,200 in 1800, 56,700 in 1871, 150,700 in 1900, and 251,000 in 1930. Population grew rapidly during 1945 to 1965, peaking at 440,000. After 1965, population declined due to suburbanization, to below 360,000 in the 1990s. After 2000, there has again been population growth, surpassing the 400,000 mark in 2014.